UKMotorTalk.
Well, hello you lot, it's 2022 and welcome back. I'm here, I'm Mike.
I'm Jim, hello, Happy New Year.
And I'm Dave. How are we all? Happy New Year.
And I'm afraid Graham can't be with us this evening because he got a new bike for Christmas and it has a very uncomfortable saddle. Things that have happened since we last spoke to you. Well, Christmas happened, but that's a million years ago now, so a long time ago. Did anyone get anything good?
A rather large bottle of scotch, so yeah.
Couple of weeks off work.
Well, not just due to self-isolation.
No, actual wise planning this time last year, booking my leaving before anyone else got the chance. They've got wise to that one now, though, so next year I'll probably be working all through Christmas and New Year. But hey, it was good while it lasted.
I will say that the Playmobil we talked about last time, I did get a Back to the Future DeLorean. I was really quite excited by that. And all the sets that go for the different movies. But my little boy sees it on the table and goes, "Play with Daddy's car?" And he raises one eyebrow and looks at me and he's like, "Oh, okay." And so we've been playing Back to the Future a lot, which is fine. Fine by me. Quite happy with that. And here we are in a new year. What can I say? Variable. Sometimes it's really warm, sometimes it's freezing cold, but otherwise we've just rolled into 2022. And here's hoping it's better than the last one. I'm sure it's gonna be fine, isn't it? We've already had some good news today, haven't we?
Yes, we have. The government have halted the rollout of so-called smart motorways, which has got to be a good thing. Pending more inquiries. They reckon they want 5 years worth of running and results before they can then say yay or nay. And it does seem that they are going to be, if nothing else, putting in more refuges, more places where you can break down opposite if you're lucky. So at least we should be grateful for that. But this is at least proof that the government does listen sometimes. I think there was enough weight of opposition against it that they couldn't not listen. And yeah. I mean, won't get political. This lot tend not to listen to anyone but themselves. But for once, it does seem that they have heeded the basically continual brickbats they were getting. I mean, everybody said what a stupid idea this was. And it is all just to do with cost cutting. There's nothing else to do with it. It's just pure money. And people were dying as a result of it. And I think there was even an incident in the last week on the M25 where somebody died. And I think that was in a smart so-called running section. So it keeps happening. So the sooner that they decide that it's a stupid idea and put it all back to hard shoulder, the better as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and it's costing them millions to upgrade the roads they've already upgraded.
Yeah, it's money thrown away.
It's funny that you mention the government announcing things today, because I didn't hear the government announce anything about this. I thought all of the government were busy talking about other things today, I must admit. So that slightly passed me by, that one. Topical, you see.
It was this morning before the incumbent of number 10 Downing Street had to go and mumble his apologies to his peers in Parliament. But there we go.
I did like that. That was I didn't realise I was at a party. I mean, that's not a bad excuse, is it? As far as they go, it's when you get pulled over by the police. Do you know how fast you were going? No, I don't. Well, you were doing 104. Totally sorry, I didn't realise. Is normally the excuse that most of us give. So it's as excuses go, it's been well trotted out.
Well, that would explain why I was stood there with a party hat and a bottle of wine in my hand. I mean, I'm completely at loss as to how that would have happened. I mean, it's a mistake anyone could have made under the circumstances. On the real world, yes, there are at the moment 375 miles of so-called smart motorway, including 235 miles with no hard shoulder. That's 235 miles where you've got to hope that you are opposite a lay-by, and that is just absolutely insane. So, if you're listening, the government, please listen very carefully and scrap the idea. It is utter madness.
It is. I can't believe they're having to spend millions and millions to upgrade roads they've already upgraded, where they should just put another lane in anyway. They're going to be putting in some sort of radar detector that's going to show that people have broken down, which I think would be brilliant. Because bearing in mind how often you're stopped on the motorway anyway, it's going to be constantly saying, "There's traffic stopped. There's traffic stopped." Everyone's seen the photos of an AA or an RAC patrol wagon where they put them, they park up, put the cars on or the vans on hard lock. So if they get rear-ended, hopefully it pushes it out the way. But we've all seen them reduced by half. And there was one on the back of a truck. I think it was yesterday, or day before yesterday. I looked at it and thought, bloody hell. Just the back end of it just completely shunted in. Where, someone's fallen asleep, a truck has fallen asleep or something, and bang, terrifying.
I remember my driving instructor teaching me that if you do break down anywhere, point the wheels away from you, and similarly, if you're waiting to turn right at a junction, don't point the wheels to the right, because if somebody runs into the back of you, you'll then go into oncoming traffic as well. So always stuck with me, that.
Yeah, that's very wise advice. Very wise advice. But I mean, I think ultimately this whole fiasco sums up, and it's a tragic fiasco. People have lost their lives. I mean, it's the families of these people that have basically been to Parliament and represented themselves as the face of the folly that these people have enacted upon us. And I think it just basically sums up the phrase false economy, if nothing else.
There's been other changes as well, hasn't there? Because this month, January, there's going to be changes to the highway code too.
Yes, yeah, this is a bit of a change, and again, controversial because there's now this new hierarchy of road users. So if you're in a big motorised truck, you are responsible for giving way to somebody on fewer wheels than yourself. So if you're driving a car, you have to look out for people on two wheels. If you're on two wheels, you have to look out for pedestrians, and if you're pedestrians, then God help you. But it's
see, that's the mirror opposite of common sense, because again, going back to my days of learning how to drive, my instructor was going through how and when you need to give way. So if the obstruction's on your side, you give way to the right. If you're heading uphill, you have right of way, etc. And he said, but at the end of the day, the overriding rule is if they're bigger than you, give way, because if you bump into each other, it will hurt you more. Yeah. So don't hit something that's bigger than you. Watch out for things that are bigger than you. Well, fair enough, and that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, well, essentially, it gives... Well, cyclists now have the right to continue across junctions without being driven into by car drivers, which I would like to think that the vast majority of us would probably try and avoid doing anyway. I know there are people who will sort of zoom ahead and try and chop a cyclist or a motorcyclist or whoever. But the problem is you've now got, and the IAM have voiced this, saying that you're going to have the highway code, which about 99.9% of people never touch again the minute they pass their driving test, unless you are one of the people that goes for the advanced driving test, or you are just particularly bored in the toilet and you have it sat there next to you. It's not a binding thing, so most people will say, well, I never need to touch that again, why would I bother? So there's going to be a whole swathe of people who aren't aware of these new regulations that are coming in, whereas cyclists, who made up about 70% of the respondents to the survey that brought in these changes, are going to be carte blanche, riding around, safe in the knowledge that they can just carry on going down the inside of you as they approach junctions, and wondering why they're being wiped out by cars, because the car drivers won't be looking at the highway code and won't know that you now have, not by law, but something that can be brought up in a court of law in their defence. They have the right to carry on doing that now, and you can't chop them. You have to give way at junctions where you're turning out of or into a turning. Cyclists now have the priority, as do pedestrians who are wanting to cross on the corners. I mean, obviously at the minute, a pedestrian crossing a road that you're wanting to turn into has priority and you have to give way, and rightly so. But now if you see them standing on the side of the road, you have to allow them across. And likewise, if you see a pedestrian wanting to cross on a zebra crossing, if they're stood at the side of the road, you have to stop and let them go. Whereas before, and this is a little known, you only had to give way if they were already on the crossing. So there's quite a few changes. Yeah. No.
Yeah, see, it's an odd one, as you say, about intention. You know, I think that the vast majority of sensible people try and avoid an accident in the first place, because ultimately it doesn't really matter who's wrong or right if the cyclist ends up with their head split open and they're dead and you've got a scratched up car, or the cyclist is miffed and both cars are scratched, or whatever happens. You know, ultimately I'd rather, regardless of being right or wrong, I don't want my car to get scratched. And if I'm riding around on my bike, I like my head to be roughly the shape, well, I don't like it the shape it is, but it's I would prefer it stayed roughly intact.
That's what you've got.
So it kind of, you know, it removes the, well, actually try and avoid an accident. It doesn't matter who's wrong or right, just don't have the crash. The cyclist going straight on, if you're indicating to turn left, you know, no other vehicle has the right to do that. Why does a cyclist have the right to do that? It's ignoring the I believe it is somewhere in the highway code about vehicles performing manoeuvres have right of way as well. If you're one I'm not sure about, maybe we'll look up, or maybe David, you can educate. If I'm looking to reverse into my drive, so I drive up my road and I want to reverse into my drive, so I try and make my intentions as clear as possible in that I indicate left as I'm approaching, and as I'm slowing down I then put my hazard lights on, stop and reverse into my driveway. But the number of people who overtake me, have been following me and then try and overtake me as I'm reversing back, and of course as I put left hand down steering on, the front of the car swings out and they end up nearly ploughing into me. I was kind of under the assumption that as I'd indicated and made my intentions clear and was reversing, they shouldn't overtake until safe to do so. But what do you know the actual answer?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but common sense, you would think, would lead the people behind you to have been looking ahead far enough to have anticipated what you were going to do and being polite enough to allow you to complete your manoeuvre. But there is the argument that if you are wanting to reverse out of or into a major road, you should avoid that if at all possible. So if your house is on a busy trunk road, don't do it.
Yeah, not a busy trunk road at all. It's a relatively quiet residential road, but there'll be two cars drive up there every 15 minutes, one of which happens to be me and one of which happens to be somebody who can't look 6 feet in front of their car directly behind me, as it always seems to go.
There's your answer. That's the thing. I personally, if you know they're likely to be a cretin, would be just to sort of pull to the side of the road, wave them past, and then complete your manoeuvre in blissful silence, because it would be, given you're probably driving an electric vehicle these days.
See, the way I try and do it is, if I think they haven't seen, is as before, indicate, then hazards, pull up, stop, reverse, and then just swing enough to make them panic and stand on the brakes, and then glare at them, and then reverse back in as slowly as possible, taking preferably 4 shunts to get properly lined up with the driveway, and then taking a second just to pause and thank them for waiting for me as I drive in. So it's directly related to people that try and push their way out at junctions. I slow down and swerve around their bonnet at the last minute just to highlight the fact that they've been a pleb. But it's with giving that carte blanche to cyclists to do X, Y, and Z. It's I was in the right. Yes, you're brain damaged and you'll no longer be able to walk again. But yes, you were in the right. You did have right of way. Well done.
The problem we've got, though, is that it's not enshrined in law, but it's enshrined in something that could very well and would be used in cases where the law is invoked if something happens and you go to court, in that there is automatic culpability assumed for the person in the more dominant vehicle. So basically, if you're in a car and something happens to a cyclist, you've automatically got the weight of the law against you, which I think is utterly wrong. I mean, it should be judged on its merits. I think
so, yeah. Completely.
And it's basically, when you consider, again, I mean, the IAM, let me just dig out the quote because I wrote it down. The IAM Neil Grieg, who's the chief of IAM, said at the time it is skewed and biased because 75% of respondents to the DFT were cyclists. They were actively whipped up, if you like, to get on there and to push the cyclist case. And fair enough, that's what's going to happen, isn't it? If the DFT go, well, there's a huge weight of opinion here and we should really listen to the cyclists. And, I'm not being political here, but cyclists can basically do no wrong ever since 2012 and Bradley Wiggins ruling the roads. If you live in Surrey or Sussex, you'll know what I mean. The roads are awash week in, week out with the Lycra Brigade, which, fair enough, it's it's very active and so on, but it doesn't give you the automatic right to the road. And unfortunately, what happens now is technically that is exactly what has happened.
Yeah. We've got the mammals, the middle-aged men in Lycra.
No one needs to see that.
No, the real problem is that you can be in a queue of traffic and you've stopped and you're turning left. And if you're on a road bike, or any bike really, but on a road bike particularly, it's not difficult to do 20, 30 miles an hour or whatever. And what's going to happen, there's going to be a huge queue of traffic and you've got someone bombing past who's undertaking the traffic on the left-hand side as you're mid-manoeuvre, and they're not there, and bang, they're there. Motorcyclists understand this. They've seen this for years. They overtake a queue of traffic and the chances are that someone at the front is turning right. It's happened to me. I was in the process of turning right, and a bike came flying down. I stopped because I saw the bike in time, but he was just too busy overtaking everything. On a motorbike, you can hear it, but if you've got people coming along the inside, flying down your left-hand side, you're not going to see them. They're doing 30 miles an hour. You're going to go and turn. There's going to be an almighty crash. It's a terrible, terrible idea. I completely get that it should be illegal to overtake and then immediately turn left and cut a cyclist off. That's just not okay. But if you're stationary and you're turning left and something comes flying along your left-hand side, no, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't be giving away to someone who's undertaking you.
Yes, who's made the signal, checked their mirror, made the signal.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it should be common sense, but you're going to have cyclists who, it could be argued, have more than a little bit of holier-than-thou attitude about them. Some, shall we say, are going to say, it's my right, I'm going to do what I want. And it's basically going to make life a lot more difficult for everyone. Everyone's going to be coming off worst on this. The IAM's view is that the safest option is to separate those who are more vulnerable from those who are likely to cause them harm. So more cycle routes, more separated cycle routes, even having cycle routes alongside traffic, but separated by a physical, sort of the little curbstone markers. That's perfect. I mean, you can see that there's a delineation. You've got a reminder there that there's likely to be a cyclist, so it's probably more likely to make you look when you are turning into junctions and so on. It's more of a feature on the road that's drawing your attention, whereas at the minute you could be, if you've driven in London, you have my sympathies. I haven't had to do it for a little while, but you basically have to be, your head's on a gimbal because you have cyclists left, right, front, back of you going everywhere they like. Motorcyclists as well.
Across the front with the
exactly.
Just Eaton alike.
Yeah, and it's not fun. And I accept that everyone has to share the road, but it should be fair's fair. If you're going to use the road, you have an equal responsibility to look out for yourself and not just expect us to do it for you all the time.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, when you say on the attitude, the constant motorists' gripe about cyclists is how they will quite happily cycle through a red light. And there's hours of fun watching videos on YouTube about cyclists who go through red light and they get clotheslined by people as they go through or pushed off their bike. And I would quite happily do that. It's a bit like driving around in Brad the Volvo. We mentioned earlier you try and take avoiding action before an accident. You don't just blast your horn and claim that you have right of way and crash into them unless you're in Brad the Volvo, in which case it's fine. But
you don't crash into things with Brad, you go through them.
I'm almost waiting for the day that I'm crossing the road and a cyclist goes through a red light, because it means I can quite happily push him off his bike and hopefully the pain will educate him. And at that stage, because he is a bigger, in inverted commas, road user than me, then it's automatically his fault. But I think the red light violations need to be clamped down on, and I don't know, is it time for the age-old discussion around insurance, not necessarily road tax or road fund licence as it's called these days. Everybody says road tax, of course that was abolished years ago. I don't think they necessarily need to pay to use the roads, but I don't think insurance is a bad idea for cyclists, because if they bump into a car and it's their fault, then they can cause a lot of damage. But I think it also emphasises the need for a dash cam. Front and rear, definitely. If possible, get it wired in, hardwired in, and there just to protect yourself. I nearly collected a cyclist, only a young lad who could have only been about 12 or 13, early part of last year. It was still dark at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And I was driving home one night and he just shot straight out in front of me at a roundabout. Didn't start, or I think he'd seen me too late, panicked and carried on, wearing dark jeans, a dark jacket, no lights on, no nothing.
No lights, yeah.
If I'd have hit him, that would have been my fault, unless I had a dash cam to say, look, it's pitch black, middle of the night, no lights, no nothing, and he just shot out in front of me. It's his own stupid fault. And can I have his parents' details so I can claim for the damage on the car? We had it just outside work, didn't we? A young girl ran out in front of a motorcyclist, ran straight out in front of him, didn't look, just ran out into the road, collected him, took him clean off the bike, he was only a young lad, but the police's attitude towards him was absolutely abhorrent.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And we'd looked at it on CCTV, and I had to say to the young lad's dad, quite loudly in front of the police, so they could hear us. Well, they're not treating him nicely. They're treating him as if it was his fault. She ran straight out in front of him. Not your fault at all. I've got it all on CCTV, so you need it, you let me know. And the relief on his dad's face was marked, because the way the police were going was, this awful, horrible hoodlum of a motorcyclist had tried to mow down an innocent young girl, when actually it was a young girl's fault. Bless her. Don't want any harm to come to her. She was okay as it happened. But, that's got to be on the parents of that kid to be picking up for that young lad's damage that he suffered to his bike. So
he came
again,
off.
it's common sense, isn't it? Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, so that's damage to the bike. His helmet will need replacing, all sorts of stuff, and that keeps him off the road for a period of time until he can afford to fix it. But again, it kind of doesn't matter who's right or wrong. If you'd have had the common sense to look and not run out in front of the road, all of that could have been avoided.
There are so many problems here. I mean, with the cycle lane you mentioned earlier on down the side of the road. My route to work from home, they're currently doing road work, so they're digging everything up. They're basically putting a cycle lane in the whole way from my house to the office. Cracking. But down the side of the road, there is already a cycle lane. But because the cyclists have to stop to go round a roundabout or stop whatever, they just ride on the road. So that they're causing a huge problem by riding on the road. And I had the same thing. I was crossing the road that Jim mentioned. Red light. I was halfway across. Cyclist went straight through the red light in front of me, nearly knocked me over. I shouted at him. He stopped. What, do you think I should have stopped then? Well, yes, you probably should have stopped then, because you've just gone through a red light, you idiot. And yeah, unfortunately, there are some people that think the law doesn't apply to them anymore, but clearly it does. And you can't have an arrogance on one side and then just expect that, I'll just do whatever the hell I like. It just doesn't work. We've got to share the road, fair enough. When I'm on a bike, I try to be careful of everything else and keep an eye on the cars and pedestrians and the rest of it. But when I'm in my car, by the same token, or one of the cars, I just need to make sure that everyone is safe, that we can all carry on as we should do and go about our daily business without just people coming along and undertaking me on the left-hand side. Rant over.
We had a wonderful sort of moment of there must be a God demonstrated to us as we were leaving work one night. And where I used to work was in West London, and as there was a big sort of junction going into where I worked, sort of one of those staggered pedestrian crossings, junctions. Cyclists regularly went through on red, and it was a bit of a bête noire for anyone who had to cross that bit of road. Just about to go across, cyclist goes through on red. My colleague goes, "Oi, I won't use the actual word, it's red, you," and he used another word. And the cyclist turned round, flicked him the V's, turned round, looked where he was going, went straight at the back of the bus that was parked in the bus lane that he just slammed into the back of. At which point my mate called him the word again, and we carried on our way. It was very, very entertaining.
It would have been wonderful at that point as well to scoop him up and extract his name and address from him to send a bill for the damage to the bus. That reminds me, there's a very satisfying video on YouTube of a cyclist
I've seen this one.
Swerves out to the middle of the road, takes up prime position through a pinch point, which is totally acceptable, but you can see that they don't make any shoulder check, they don't make any whatever. And just cut I think it's a little MX-5 straight up. So he blasts the horn quite rightly, and the cyclist turns around, that arrogant man, turns back round again to see that, there's a curve there, bang, and hits the deck. I mean, if that was me driving that Mazda, the end of the video would have been me picking them up round the collar, laughing as loud as I could into the camera, then getting back in the car and driving off again. It's just, that's a very nice bit of karma, that video.
Yeah, karma's great when it happens, isn't it? It's rare, but when it does happen, it's well worth the effort.
They do mention as well in the new highway code revisions, if you're on a bike and you're in a position where you need to be seen, you should maybe move out into the middle of the road so that you can make your manoeuvre or whatever and be safe. And that I kind of get. And it's the same when you see proper bikers as opposed to people just weaving in and out of traffic. And I don't mean filtering at a sensible speed. I mean the idiots that are flipping through one way or the other and going into the oncoming and nearly causing accidents, that kind of stuff. I mean, proper, mature, sensible bikers. And you will see, if there's a lot of traffic and it's built up, they'll quite often sit in the middle of the lane and they will wait and they will move with the traffic because they can see what's happening and they can see buses are trying to get past the opposite direction, and you can tell who are the people that have been riding for a long time, because these aren't the idiots that are riding around in flip-flops and shorts or whatever. These are people that obviously been riding for a long time, generally speaking, have all the leathers on, the proper boots and all the rest of it, and are just generally quite sensible about what's around them. And this is what needs to happen with cyclists, with motorists, with everybody, basically. You just need to be very conscious of what's around you and just don't be a cock. It seems like it, to my mind, it doesn't seem that complicated. And that doesn't mean, oh, now I can go on the left-hand side so that people don't, I have priority if they're alongside them, stop them from turning. It doesn't mean I can go hacking along the left-hand side at 30 miles an hour and they should just stop, because it just doesn't work like that.
The thing that bothers me is the presumption of guilt, the automatic presumption of guilt if you're in a car and a lorry or whatever. All car drivers hate cyclists, and therefore they're automatically the ones that are going to try and kill them. So if the cyclist was zipping up the outside and wasn't bothering to look at the flashing orange thing on the side of the car and the fact that 3/4 of the car was already into the bloody turning, that's still the fault of the driver. I just think, like you say, it's common sense. There is no common sense anymore. Everything's got to be legislated for, because everyone wants to blame everybody else. And if everyone just looked out for anyone else, exactly. And just look out. Just everyone take care, pay attention, look further than your phone, look actually out at what's going on around you. And cyclists don't wear earphones when you're riding around as well, so you can hear emergency vehicles, horns, the sound of engines, that sort of thing, which might give you a clue as to what's going on around you. Don't immunise yourself from the world that you're actually existing in and that's hazardous to you. Do everything you possibly can to make it less so. Don't just rely on everyone else to look out for you. And I think we'd all get along a lot better.
So certainly someone's put a pound in Dave, but I completely agree with you there. What's going to happen is you're going to get articulated lorries with bikes wedged underneath the middle of them.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be the lorry driver's fault, obviously.
Yeah.
Because they're not highly trained drivers at all. They don't have to do a huge course and spend a fortune to get themselves through the test and learn how to drive one of these things and sort of counter for all the angles and having to take wide swerves going round these corners that the cyclist can now just wave their way straight across. Oh yeah, absolutely. Lorry drivers fault every time.
Yeah, and get rewarded by the likes of having to pee in a bucket because there's no toilets anymore or anything else. It's just,
No.
But if you've ever jumped up in a cab for lorry, and if you ever get the opportunity to do this, sometimes have them at fairs and bits and pieces where they say, I'll get up and sit in the Actros or whatever and have a play. You look around you, my God, there's so much you can't see. If you think it's bad and you need parking sensors to reverse, you need to have a look at what it's like. And yes, they've got better, and yes, there are cameras places and they point down and look at blind spots and stuff. But if you're sat in the seat in a truck, you try and look directly down. Get your mate to stand in front of the truck, assuming it's not moving. But directly in front of the truck, you can't see him. There's no way. And if a bike was in front of you, you wouldn't see it. If a car's in front of you, I'd imagine you might be able to see just the front of the bonnet. It's scary how much you can't see. And yes, you get people then, oh, well, it's my right way, this, that, and the other. And I'm sorry, mate. I honestly couldn't see you. There's going to be a lot of people killed because of this stupid new rule. I understand what they're intending, but it's bloody dangerous. It is really dangerous, and people are going to die, especially in places like London.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Doesn't it remind you of something? Oh, what was it we were talking about half an hour ago? Oh, smart motorways. People are going to die, and people have died, and I am absolutely certain, I'm afraid, that you are right. But it should be pointed out, just as you mentioned that, remind me, that these regulations don't actually come into force for whatever force they do. Well, they are not valid until the end of this month, which is January 2022. So basically, if you're a cyclist and you want to go whiz down the inside of a load of articulated lorries, hold off until the 1st of February.
When you'll be completely and utterly safe. And the little force field will surround you and you'll be fine. I will point out at this point that I have a bike which I cycle, so I suppose I'm also a cyclist. Jim has a bike which he cycles about, so you're a cyclist. Dave, are you a cyclist?
Me, I do. Yep, a leisure cyclist.
Yeah, oh yes. Yeah, no, nothing so serious. So we are all cyclists here.
Yeah, it is worth pointing out we are cyclists, we are pedestrians, and we are, and when I'm performing the said manoeuvre of reversing into my driveway, if there's people walking up and down the pavement, I give way to them. I always do.
Yeah.
the number of people that just stand there like a lemon and look at you.
Yeah.
So, well, get on with it if you're going is irritating. But again, it shows that the highway code is not common knowledge, because pedestrians should read the highway code too. Everybody should read it, because whether you're a pedestrian, horse rider, cyclist, motorcyclist, car driver, HGV driver, hovercraft pilot, whatever it is that's using the road, you need to be aware of the rules. As a pedestrian, probably more so than anyone, because you're the most vulnerable, I would say.
Yes, I mean, you probably have a bit of a job convincing most pedestrians that was a good idea, but you're absolutely right. Anybody who has any business in or around a road, which is the vast majority, if not all, of the constituents of this country, should have at least seen it or picked it up, leafed through it if you're a pedestrian, if nothing else. Just familiarise yourself with what other people are likely to do to you, so that when you do step off the road where you're not supposed to, don't be surprised when a cyclist comes along and knocks you flying. Or cars or lorries or buses, anything else on the road, not just cyclists, but you get my point.
Right, moving away from angry rants then. We have got some things, but we have actually booked the fist in for a track day, and we've bought many things for it. In fact, all the cars have been bleeding me dry. But I'll let you lead off with the fist, Jim.
Yes, we have. Well, we've actually spent a few pounds on it as well, with maintenance and a few upgrades, haven't we? So we've got some new brake discs and pads to go on it, because they're slightly juddery and worn out after our trip to Donington. They're not in the best health, are they? They lasted well around Brands, but you definitely feel that. Yes. I didn't break them. Well, they still work. They just got a bit hot.
It's like sitting on a washing machine with 3 legs on it. It just goes under heavy braking now. It's most unpleasant.
It's fine. It just shows I was trying hard, but you broke the windscreen, so it's fine. It doesn't matter. We'll call it 1-1. But no, we've got some upgraded brake pads and just some replacement discs for it, and some rather funky 3D printed fog light replacement air intake thingamabobs, which are genius. I definitely think I'm going to have to invest in a 3D printer at some point, because these are very cool little things. So we've got that, and some bit of steel tubing. We just need to get some flat bar and have a friendly word with our local welder and get him to weld up some little brackets for us to get some cooling to the brakes, and definitely cool the power steering fluid down. So it's in our showroom at the moment, so we were so short of new cars, we thought, oh sod it, we'll put the track car in there, keeps it warm and dry, and it looks interesting. Got slightly pulled up on our audit when the auditor said, oh, vehicles in the showroom must be free of stickers. We couldn't really argue with that, because there's probably a good 3 kilos worth of stickers on the outside of it. But it's sort of sweating a bit of power steering fluid all over the showroom floor as well at the moment, isn't it? So we do need to sort that, I think.
These duct things
only
are pretty cool.
Only a bit. Most of it's in the engine bay, but some of
it's all over everything in the engine bay. These duct things are pretty cool. So where the fog lamps were at the bottom, either side of the grille, the glass bit comes out, the whole fog lamp unit comes out. You've got these 2 intakes. It looks like it's got black eyes down the bottom now. And then it has pipework ducting that comes off and then gets piped right into the back of the brake disc. This is what we've got, these tubes and the little brackets and things we're making up for. So as you're driving along, it forces air through the brakes and then out through the wheels. And because everything just gets a bit too hot under there. What's pretty incredible is cost us what? It's not a lot of money so far. 100 quid, is it, all in? Something like that. By the time we've done all the pipes and bits and pieces, we've paid the world in
something
biscuits.
like that. I think. Not a huge amount of money, was it? And if it keeps everything nice and cool, I think because we're running smaller wheels, so heat build up in the smaller barrel's an issue, because there's not a huge amount of room between the caliper and the barrel of the wheel, is there? So they're definitely getting warm in there.
Just looking at the pictures you were sharing with us there, Jim, it reminds me those little things of the replacement headlights that you can get for the. I think it's the Dodge. Is it the Challenger Hellcat, where one of the inner headlights gets replaced with an air intake to force air into that ridiculously big engine and keep the supercharger
fed. That.
And they used to do it in the old days with the Morettis. You know, the Moretti headlamps. You'd take the main beam out and put them where the main beam used to be.
Oh,
Yeah, so it pushed the air through there. It's the same sort of principle. And we've actually booked Goodwood, which is probably not the cheapest track day that we've ever attended. To the extent we're there for a track afternoon, which includes lunch, which I think is very gentlemanly. I very much like the idea that you have lunch and then you go out and drive.
Luncheon.
But it's a 3-hour session of which you're allowed to drive for 45 minutes. It doesn't seem like a lot for half a track day. So I guess you come off and have some more luncheon and then go back on again. It does seem like a short trip, but I really quite like Goodwood. We all really quite like Goodwood, and so it's something we're very much looking forward to. So there is that coming up. Definitely something to look forward to.
If nothing else, it means we'll be able to put another track outline sticker on the inside of the sun strip as well, because we've been to the track. So that's the rule. Every time we go to a new track, we do a new sticker for the inside.
It's sort of like a car tattoo, I guess. And the inspiration comes from a number of old rally cars and things where they would put the run plaques on the inside of the roof. And if you've ever seen this, it looks brilliant when they've completely covered the inside of the car in the stickers of the various campaigns they've been in. So as we've been through and crossed off the tracks, so they are on the inside of the sun strip. Just something for us. Maybe we should print loads of Brad's hatches off, because we've done a few of those. We could have like kills, like they have on the side of World War II planes, fighter planes or something.
We've done it a few times, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Aside from that, all the cars seem to be bleeding me dry in one way or the other. Focus had a new core pack yesterday. The Mini, I can't remember what that needs now, but I've got to do the windscreen because somehow that's got damaged. I'm not saying I've got form here, but that does seem to happen. Needs a new rear wiper motor and bits and pieces. Nothing really exciting.
You have got form. 100% of the damaged windscreens I can recall in recent memory have been damaged by you.
Yes, okay. Well, let's not get caught up in who's damaged what. And on the way back, doing a favour, dropping a car back, I picked up the Mini from a friend of mine and drove it home, hit a massive pothole, split the run flat, put an egg in the sidewall. And then the powder coat on the wheel managed to crack all of that. So I now need the wheel completely refurbishing, and I had to have 2 new front tyres. So a couple of run flat Pirellis later, I am once again poorer. And then, well, I've been ticking along with the onion. So you'll hopefully look forward to a bit of an update coming on that soon, which we will put on our YouTube channel. So look us up. We're at UKMotorTalk everywhere on the socials and on YouTube, of course. There's been a lot going on there. So everything underneath has been completely refurbished, painted, undersealed, or what have you. And then I've put it back on the car, and because it's so unbelievably cold in my garage, working 18 inches off the floor, just because it is pretty horrific, you put it all together and you just decide to put the lower arms in, and you jack them up very carefully, using whatever lubricant you need to do to make sure the bushes all fit, and you pop it all in, and where you've got the everything supported with rags on it, it's damaged the paint. How is this possible? I've spent ages trying to paint everything, make it look half reasonable, put it all together again, and it chips it again. In truth, the only reason why I bothered to do it in the first place is because the car's 31 and a bit years old now, or whatever, nearly 32 years old, and it's lasted that long because it was treated in the first place. So I kind of wanted to do it again and do it properly in the hopes that it will last long enough for them to be worthless again, because what happens? It happens in cycles, car ownership, and the value of it. Like the old stuff, the vintage stuff. Sadly, a lot of the old guys that were really into that are no longer with us or are giving up driving. The car values start to drop off. At the moment, 80s stuff is worth an absolute fortune, and so is 90s stuff, because people like me and people a little bit older than me had those kind of cars growing up when they were a few £100 and they were really exciting to have an XR3i, and you ragged it and it ended up in a field or whatever. People are buying them now, stick them in the garage, take them out at weekends, sitting behind their Cosworths with a little T-urn and bits and pieces going at shows, all that kind of stuff, and they love it. But they are an absolute fortune, to the point where if you want to go out and buy a Sierra Cosworth, you have to spend more money than you would do on buying a really nice Porsche, which to me seems absolute madness. And I'm a diehard fan of the old fast forwards. Whole point was that they were cheap blue collar cars that could, kick Porsches up the arse or whatever. Yeah, you could go out and beat supercars in their day. It doesn't kind of work if they're more money than the cars you were trying to beat.
Know what you mean about the value of 80s and 90s cars. It's got to a stage. A few years ago, me and a friend were umming and ahhing about getting a Mark 1, Mark 2 Golf. Oh yeah, I'd like one of those. Oh yeah, I'll keep an eye. Or I might get one of those. But the discussion we had the other day was, should we go halves on one and own half each? Because I haven't got £20,000 to spend on one of them. So, if you've got 10 and I can find 10, then yeah, we'll have it between us and just, it would be like a child after a divorce, wouldn't it? We just have to have shared custody of it and drive it on alternate weekends. But yeah, when you see pristine, to be fair, pristine examples, tatty ones go for a little bit cheaper if you put the work in yourself. But when you see a pristine Mark 1 Golf go through for upwards of 20 grand, it's quite depressing in a way, really. So they're just being pushed out of reach now, unfortunately.
Well, I was looking the other day, just as you do on a board mode, flicking through Auto Trader, and guess how much I found, albeit it was a Raider edition, so it was the one everyone wanted, the really nice sort of
Renault 5.
The Renault 5 GT Turbo, 8th registration, probably one of the last. I think it had done about 35,000 miles, which isn't a lot really when you consider it. Guess how much they wanted for that?
35.
No, it wasn't quite that much.
No, 15 grand?
It was about 19,995. It was a dealer, so somebody who knew the value, but 20 grand for a Renault 5 GT Turbo. I mean, the thing is though, the gamut is huge. You go to the bottom end of that, ratty ones that have had massive turbos put on them, the rear wiper delete, slammed to the floor, all of that sort of thing. They're going for sort of 3.5, 4 grand. But even then, that's not inconsiderable money for something that's basically a shed, and you're going to have to spend a lot of money putting it back to normal. It does show the 80s and 90s, you're absolutely right. They are the thing to have at the minute, and I'm as guilty. I would dearly, dearly like to have an Uno Turbo again now, but that's way out of reach because there weren't a huge amount of them to start with, and those that are still left are probably stupid money now.
It's odd when you sat there looking at a Mark 1 or a Mark 2 Golf that sold for more money recently than a 2006 R32.
Yeah,
that's just where I understand the nostalgia and the feeling around the Mark 1 and Mark 2, but it's just I'm only saying it because I would much rather own a Mark 1 or a Mark 2 than a Mark 5, and that probably points as to why the Mark 1 or Mark 2 is worth more money. But yeah, it's just the desire to recapture the youth, and probably actually it would be not that exciting or interesting to drive compared to some modern cars. Certainly power-wise, it would be a tootling around Sunday drive out for a picnic kind of thing. But yeah, it's still just an itch which I think is going to have to get scratched sooner or later. But every time you look through them and they go through, it just seems to, it's like saving up a deposit for a house. Every time you've managed to save up an extra £5,000, that's not enough. You needed to save 7.5, so you go away and save another 2.5, and they say, oh, actually, no, you need another 5 again by now, because the amount you can save is going up slower than the deposit you need.
It's the eternal problem, isn't it? If on your travels as a matter of interest, if on your searches for a Mark 1 or Mark 2 tin top version of the Golf, if you find a nice or possible project version of the Mark 1 convertible GTI, the Carman, I'd be quite interested in one of those because I always absolutely loved them. Somebody I worked with at the very first place I worked when I was a trainee engineer, he bought with an inheritance, it was G-Reg, that aubergine colour GTI on alloys, Mark 1, and it was just the most beautiful thing. Absolutely lovely car. That's the one that you're showing us now. That sort of thing, but the more spiffy GTI version. $4 and a bit grand. Not too bad.
Yeah, that's the thing. You look around, you see the odd one, you think, it's not too bad, that. And but the one next to it that just seems to go for crazy money. I mean, there's an F-Reg 8-valve Mark II that I think sold for £3,000. It says winning bid and it says sold, and that seems good to me.
But then you hit the sort of nirvana of a 16-valve big bumper in oak green with 20,000 miles going for sort of thick end of £25,000, I should imagine, something like that.
Yeah, and of course I think that nowadays to find, if you said, okay, well I'll get that and I'll put the big bumpers on it. I think to find a set of big bumpers these days is you're going to be paying a hell of a chunk of change for front and rear big bumpers, aren't you? So it's that. Actually, it looks reasonable at 3, but by the time you've done a complete body restoration, that adds what, 3-4 grand to it, something like that. If you do a reasonable amount of work yourself, and you want it done to a wonderful standard. And then if you, Well, I found a man who's got front and rear big bumpers. They're a bit tatty, and he wants $2,000 for them. Well, how many others are for sale? None.
Yeah, name your price.
Sounds
really,
like they're
it?
$2,000 then, doesn't it? Really. And all of a sudden you can see how actually, the immaculate one that's had everything done to it, very quickly you think by the time I've spent a few years and put all the effort in, actually I need $20,000 for it, otherwise I'm keeping it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said for actually originality, isn't there? I mean, if you've got an early 16 valve, they were different for a reason, because they were sort of a natural evolution of the 8 valve, which had small bumpers. It was only later in their life, the late 80s, where the big bumper cars suddenly arrived. And, if you're going to get an early one, leave it looking like an early one and make it as good as possible. If not, hang on and find a nice big bumper car. I can't see why you'd want to spend all that money making it something it wasn't.
Yeah, I completely agree. They're a cool looking thing. To be fair, Mark II Golfs are always my favourite shape. I reckon there's something about that shape, particularly in GTI in red with the BBS RAs on them that really tickle my pickle. I have to say, I'm a big fan of the BBS RA, which is why I've stuck on my car.
I think because my first car was a Mark II Golf, I will always have a soft spot for the Mark II Golf, because that was my first car, my first glimpse of freedom and everything that motoring brings to a 17-year-old lad, and it was wonderful. But I'm not sure. I think if I was given the choice between a Mark I and a Mark II, I think I'd probably pick a Mark I.
It's interesting. I don't have that same warm fuzzy glow whenever I see a Kia Picanto SE. Which was my first car and glimpse of freedom. I don't really get the same sort of warm feeling about it, I have to say. But the cost of the cars going up, sometimes it's proportionate to the restoration or repair amount of work put into it. Other times they are just absolutely ridiculous. And when you see, let's say, Sierra Cosworth changing hands at $150,000, RS 500 or something, you just think this is madness. That buys a very nice car now. I appreciate someone's dream car, but for me, I always think it's a bit sad when you see stuff and people buy it and they don't drive it. Because if you've got something that's like that, you kind of want to be able to take it out and take it down the pub on a Sunday. Just take it out and enjoy it. I'm not saying that everyone needs to be Mason in his Ferrari. I mean, that's a different kettle of fish entirely. But yeah, you kind of want to use this stuff, and parts are getting hard to get hold of. I tried to get hold of a new fuel pump because mine makes the sound of like a sick constipated seal whenever you start the car up now.
Just for the listeners at home, can you just do your finest impression of that?
Just getting ready, do my warm-up exercises, and you start the car. So I thought, it's fine, I'll just get a new fuel
pump. You shouldn't sound like that.
No, went to the motor.
For those of you old enough, Johnny Morris is alive and well.
Went to the motor factors. Yeah, we got a pump on the shelf. Actually, it's under a thick layer of dust. It's a Bosch one, but we'll get it down. Got downstairs. No, this is not an in-tank pump. This is an inline pump. Not right. And then just couldn't find a fuel pump. Eventually managed to get the parts numbers out of the system, the Ford system, to try and figure out what it is I was looking for. If you could buy them from Ford, they would be £586.
Cool.
I found one on eBay for £400, and another one, you apparently can get a reproduction one in Germany for about £450. Like, Jesus wept. So I've eventually managed to break it down to its components, and the actual pump bit of it, which is obviously the bit that's making the noise. I've managed to buy a new AM Motorsport one, which will work for cars up to 1,000 horsepower. So 150 horsepower should be fine for about £100, which is fine. I can live with that.
That should be adequate.
Yeah.
See, and again, I think that's fine if you're maintaining the classic. Actually, if you upgrade the fuel pump to something racy, that's absolutely fine. If the seat wore out and you put a cheap bucket seat in it and threw one of the original seats away, that would be a shame. But all the bits under the hood, if you can replace those with better components, I think that's probably okay.
You've resto modded an Orion.
Yeah.
All praise to you.
This was always the idea. At the beginning was to fit what at the time was a relatively modern engine, being a Z-Tech, which now it occurs to me is, well, the earliest ones were like 1992, 93. So they're getting on a bit now, and the newest ones went out in about 2002, 2003, maybe a little bit later in the Focus, 2005. So they are cracking on a bit now. But the original idea was to build one of those with a supercharger, run a more modern braking system, and that was they pretty much leave it alone, leave the bodywork looking as it is, and this is kind of what we've got to. So we've got 15-inch wheels, BBS RAs, which are almost identical to the original ones that were on the car, just an inch bigger. It runs a Cosworth brake setup at the front, which is 283mm, so quite a big size brake setup for what is a car that weighs less than a ton, and a more modern setup for the gearbox and engine and everything else, and soon hopefully engine management, just so you can use it all the time. But this is, again, these were cars that when I bought it, I think I paid about 600 quid for it. It was my student loan for a term, I remember that much. Now the insurance company, well, when I insured it, I said, okay, well, your insurance was $6,000, it's probably $7,000 this year, looking at the car and where you're at with it. And some of my friends, believe Orion owners do have friends, are saying that maybe it should be a bit more now, and it just seems absolute madness, really. It's just an old average family car, and I find it amazing. I don't find it particularly amazing when things like Ferraris and Lamborghinis and stuff survive, but when things like a mid-spec Ford Orion, or you see a VW Jetta, or the Morris Marina, Austin Allegra, who saved those? Why are they still around? How do you still see them at shows? It's madness. How did they live on? These survivor cars, I find quite incredible, really. Particularly if they're unmodified and original. You think, how on earth has this lived so long?
Well, put it this way. I mean, there was round where I used to work in West London, around Chiswick. There was quite a lot of money around there, as you can imagine. It's quite a wealthy part of West London. And there were quite a few people with some very interesting survivor classics. I mean, I used to every day drive past somebody who had a Mark 1 XR3i that wasn't in the best condition, but it was obviously a decent runner, because whenever you did hear it running, it had the proper XR3i fruity rasp off the exhaust, and it wasn't hanging about, and there was no smoke coming out the back, and that was always nice to see. There was somebody with a God only knows what it was, I was going to say a boxy mid-80s Alfa Romeo. It wasn't a 33, but it was the sort of the 3-box saloon. I can't remember which model it was. Somebody out there will know better than me. But seeing that thing pottering around was just a joy to see. Yet every other car around there was a high-end Ferrari, a Tesla, or a Mercedes, and all the sort of things that all the fanboys on YouTube go mad for. I couldn't give a monkeys about those. It was seeing these cars, these things that reminded me of my childhood, and that gave me joy that they'd survived, and gave me a link back to, when I was first getting interested in cars. The Marina was an awful car. God knows, it was the first thing I drove. I learned to drive in a Ford Fiesta officially, a Mark II Ford Fiesta as my driving instructor's car, but when I wasn't in that, I was driving my mum's Marina estate around, and it was hideous, but it taught me all about what unpowered steering was about, what a very light rear end in the wet will do, all that sort of thing, and I couldn't wait to get out of the thing. But it was my first taste of freedom, as Jim said earlier, and when I see one on the road now, it makes me smile. It makes me glad I'm not driving it, but it makes me smile. It makes me glad it survived, and it's just a joy. It really is.
I appreciate I have a weird bent for liking the old Onion. It is unusual. I have physically ruined myself, and I probably will end up with piles as a result of owning it, from having wandered around, just laid on the floor underneath it for quite so long. But when I do take it to a local show or event or something, the amount of interest and people that come up and talk to me, and it's amazing, people will pass by some exotic stuff just to come and chat about it, which must be really embarrassing for them. And I'm sorry if you're one of the people that have one of the beautiful, beautiful cars that parks next to me, and they come over and chat to a chap standing next to a Ford Orion. Just being able to open the door in better times, say, "Oh, grab a seat," and they said, "Oh God, this takes me back," or "My dad had one of these," or whatever, and people do have a proper nostalgia trip about it, and it is nice. It's nice to be able to share that with people, and the fact that people like it, and great, good for them. I'm pleased that I'm not alone in my weird bent. This does, on a slightly unrelated note, I know it's unusual for us to disappear off on a tangent here. I found myself at a mini show last year, and by chance we were sat having a picnic next to this beautifully restored yellow.
Was it in a garden surrounded by wine, and were you at work at the time?
Yes, I was down in Steen Gardens in Worthing.
You must say sorry.
So not my garden, public gardens where you could sit and drink wine if you weren't driving. And we were sat next to this, and everyone was coming up and saying, "Oh, it's a lovely car." I was like, "Yeah, it is, isn't it? Thank you. Yeah, it's great." Because it's just so complicated explaining each time. No, it's not my car. We just sat here to have a picnic or whatever. But a lot of people wouldn't even come up and ask that. They just come and go, excuse me, mate, what colour is this? I didn't know what colour it was. It was yellow. It's just a yellow van.
Mini yellow.
Yellow, yes. Yeah, but do you know what colour yellow is? Mini yellow? I've no idea.
You should have just answered, but yeah, with the wrong information, given them the wrong colour. It's like if somebody for some reason asks me when I'm wandering around Halfords where something is, and I don't know, I just give them completely the wrong information. Or Tesco, I've noticed, people come up to me and ask me where stuff is, so I just point them in completely the wrong direction for stuff. It's odd, but maybe it's something about the colour of our uniforms. It's obviously Tesco's colour, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a good point.
So our company shirts have blue and red on them. Whenever I'm a Wick, someone will say that to me and say, "Oh, where is this, that, or the other?" And you go, "I genuinely have no idea." Why not? Because I don't work here. I want to finish with one final thought, and that's not far away from me. One of the banks, like most high street banks, is shut, and they've turned it into this shop called Retro by Ronnie, and I had no idea what it was. It looked a bit like a bar or something from the outside. What it actually is a number of different rooms, one massive shop in the middle, and loads of shops that go off for it, full of just 80s toys, basically. And it is all stuff like the A-Team and Knight Rider.
I've seen this, and I kept meaning to go in there, but you can't really tell what it is from the outside.
It's amazing.
Not that obvious.
It's incredible. They've got a brand new Sinclair C5 in there. They've got a big track. It's full of old Tamiya toys. Downstairs, they've got the old vault. You can have your photo taken by the old vault. They've got another 1,000 items in there. But if you like things like Airwolf, the A-Team, Knight Rider, Back to the Future, so it's like someone's looked and gone, let's have a look at what Gates might like for this. And they've just built this entire shop. They've got a room full of old BMXs and choppers and things hanging on the wall. Bikes, that is. It is absolutely fascinating. So, as we'd said just before Christmas, and as we've said again now, people are happy to pay for the retro stuff because it makes them happy. And maybe, who knows, when the world starts to recover a bit, and if we have some money in our pockets, maybe that's what we'll do. We will just relive our retro best lives. And I think sometimes, what's better than enjoying a bit of that nostalgia? So, from me, Mike, I guess it's a nostalgic goodbye, and we'll see you next time.
From me, Jim, it's goodbye, and if you are a cyclist and you're undertaking lorries, be careful up until the end of January.
And from me, Dave, I would just echo what my colleague has just said. Look in your mirrors, if nothing else. Cheers!
UKMotorTalk, a First Take Media production.